John Waters, you are a lunatic, a madman, and I love you to death. And Desperate Living. Desperate Living is just a phenomenal film. And yes, it's a film that made me both barf uncontrollably and fall in love completely. The film Desperate Living, made in 1977, in the heyday of the punk rock phenomena, which is important to me because John Waters is the most punk rock filmmaker of all time, and this is ridiculously obvious when you watch films like Pink Flamingos, Female Trouble, and, of course, Desperate Living. It opens with a dead rat tableau. Extreme elegance in a single shot. And it's telling you, here we go. This is what good bad taste is. I am a connoisseur of bad taste. I am the Leonardo da Vinci. I am the René Magritte of bad taste. That is what John Waters is telling us with that opening scene. The framing is wonderful. The choreography is inspired. And that dead rat is emblematic of everything that John Waters is trying to tell with this film, because it's also a feminine introduction as well. And this is a feminine kind of chaotic film. It's almost his trash film for the lesbian community within queer cinema. And I think that that's incredible. It's fantastic. Desperate Living is a brilliant satire of the status quo, of the melodrama that the status quo revels in. Every single line is yelled or banshee screamed, and this is actually probably the last time that John Waters used this completely conscious decision to have his actors yell every single bit of dialogue, and it's mostly every bit of monologue, right? It's the last time he did that. It became, he tweaked it a bit more in his films in the 80s and 90s. To make it a bit more believable in his own completely fantastical sort of way. But Desperate Living really marks the end of what you should consider as early John Waters. It's probably the last early John Waters film. And it's a wonderful insurrectionist film. It's an indictment of the status quo. It's an indictment of fairy tale existence. And Desperate Living is kind of just beautiful in that aspect, because trash can be beautiful, and John Waters makes trash look gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. And Mink Stole is sensational. I love Mink Stole. She's always been one of my favorite people within the troupe, within the carnival-like community that John Waters cultivated. Mink Stole has always been one of my favorite people, and this is really her film. Of course, Divine is not in this film. This is Mink Stole's vehicle. This time Mink Stole played the muse for the Pope of Trash, for the Pope of Filth. And she did remarkably well. Within the first 10 minutes of the film, she had me busting a gut, laughing at, this is not a communist playground, or don't tell me I don't know what Vietnam is like. Sodomites, it's hilarious. She is sensational. Mink Stole is one of the most undervalued comedic actresses in punk rock cinema, or in films as a whole, really, in American films as a whole. She's the Madeline Kahn of the American underground. Oh, most certainly. She's absolutely incredible, and Desperate Living might just be her peak. It might be peak Stole. Peak. This film is rude. This film is subversive. Desperate Living is offensive. Desperate Living is fantastical. This is John Waters making maybe one of his more offensive statements yet, because it is still just completely rude, completely vulgar to this day, not just on the visceral levels that certain films like Pink Flamingos or Mondo Trash were. Desperate Living is still incredibly offensive to modern sensibilities, because it is still very much so on the attack, on the offense. It really does want to get under your skin in a way that certain John Waters films don't necessarily want to. For instance, the film made me throw up. Not because of anything too specific, although there are a lot of specifics we could get into if we had the time, but it's really the entire feel of the film. The film is so nauseating because it's that manufactured Technicolor, because that's the Baltimore aesthetic that John Waters made popular in the 70s. And it's about making sure that the colors pop. It's manufacturing the popping of the colors, the manufactured Technicolor. That's exactly what it's called. So hand-painted sets, ridiculous outfits that no human being on Earth would be caught dead wearing. And it's just all about just popping, popping, popping. And this is maybe John Waters at his most colorful, but most colorful with the aesthetic of, remember, it's all has to go back to this dead rat tableau. It's the dead rat gore aesthetic, and it's nauseatingly hypersexual. It emotes a very grotesque, wrong, immoral feeling, and over time it just kind of overwhelms you. And now I love this movie. This is one of my favorite John Waters films. It is the pinnacle, one of the pinnacles of why I believe that this man is such a genius, because sure, it made me nauseous, it made me sick to my stomach, but at the same time, it completely won my heart. These characters are amazing. The John Waters dialogue is maybe some of his funniest. I think his funniest dialogue is in Polyester, but this is a very close second. And it was just so hilarious. And you can see very specific nods to the gay cinematic underground, to queer cinema. Edith Massey, you are absolutely incredible. She was the evil, wicked queen in this film that takes place in a, almost lesbian, hypersexual, camp of murderers called Mortville. And Edith just reigns supreme, and she has all these male lieutenants, and the male lieutenants are fashioned exactly after the bondage cops from Scorpio Rising, the classic Kenneth Anger art film. This is very much a Kenneth Anger inspired film, but it's Kenneth Anger in your face and relentlessly psychosexual. It's no longer about repressed desires, which is at the core of Scorpio Rising. It's about hypersexuality, psychosexuality, in your face sexuality. And it's completely subversive, but I love that nod to Kenneth Anger, because John Waters is a huge Kenneth Anger fan, and I love seeing these, because Scorpio Rising is considered one of the greatest art films ever made. You know, it is venerated, and it should be, because Kenneth Anger is a genius. But to see these lieutenants walking around dressed like they're from a Kenneth Anger film is on par with seeing, from the Magritte paintings, men with bowler caps walking around. It's on point with seeing the Mona Lisa just walking around in a normal film, watch my tongue there. Nothing is normal about this film, but it's like watching these people be degraded, really. But when it's done to Kenneth Anger, it almost feels like it's being understood, it's being accepted by a new American queer cinema. And that's maybe the beauty of that homage. There is absolutely no shame in a John Waters film. So where Kenneth Anger saw something as shameful, that doesn't exist here. John Waters is beyond that ideology. No need to feel ashamed. Come on in, Kenneth Anger. It's warm inside. There is a sex scene between a wrecking ball and a surfboard. Surfboard. It is an absolutely bizarre scene of trash erotica that has to be seen to be believed. I also think a part of why Desperate Living is so amazing, so incredible, so irreplaceable, is that it's a fairy tale. It's John Waters telling a fairy tale of bad taste. Because you have the wicked queen, you have the princess who gets infected with rabies, of course, because it's a John Waters film. You have the peasants rising up as insurrectionists, as anarchist insurrectionists. It's incredible. It's absolutely kind of like mind-blowing, because it's very fantastical. It's a beautiful fairy tale. It's a punk rock fairy tale of chaos, of absolute chaos. John Waters is just such an important filmmaker because it's always important to challenge the status quo. It's even, I think, more important to kind of level where that status quo is, because you have to be rebelling against something. And John Waters makes it very clear that his interpretation of the status quo is anything within any boundary of normality, with any sort of social norm, anything like it. So he alienates most of his audience, and there's only a very small, a few select misfits out there who watch it and go, that's paradise, that's utopia. Take me to Mortville. I want to go there. Let's go to Mortville. Let's start a new life, baby. And if it doesn't matter now, then it never really did. He alienates kind of false punks, false rebels. I wouldn't call them posers because they don't actually know that they are maintaining the status quo in some sort of way. If you can't take the grotesque, the delicatessen of grotesquerie, the bizarreness, the absolute trash, filth, and taste of throw up in your mouth, if you can't take that, then you're not ready for John Waters and his universe. Then you're not ready for that kind of anarchy. You're not ready for it, and he, I think, gratefully, graciously rejects you on account of that, on account of your own hang-ups, on account of your own, it's fear when it's boiled down to it. Fear of what is different, fear of what is unacceptable, always unacceptable. Fear of the taboo. It's a brilliant satire of the status quo. Desperate Living is absolutely phenomenal. I love John Waters. I love Mink Stole. What a great film. What an absolutely fucking blast. Absolute fucking blast. Oh, man, thank you guys for watching. Definitely subscribe to this channel. My name is Zachary Conan. This has been me talking about how Desperate Living made me barf and also stole my heart in the same exact, very graceful move. And a very graceful action. It's a very, very gracefully trashful film. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day. Sodomites.